The road that eats children, story time. Now, I've shared several stories about this road before and how we all avoid it. So Jason was 26, his daddy owned a local funeral home, and Jason was the one who drove the hearse. Now, Jason's parents forbade him from driving on that highway. Him and his sister, they didn't want their kids anywhere near it. Let me just say, Jason was free. He didn't drink, smoke, nothing. So around 6:30 in the morning, Jason's daddy wakes him up and tells him he's got to go to the hospital and pick up a couple of bodies to bring back to their funeral home. Jason pulls up at the hospital, signs the papers, they load the bodies up, he gets in the hearse and he leaves. And Jason knew the rules. You don't make pit stops, you don't take detours, you don't stop off and see your girlfriend. No, you pick the bodies up, you bring them back. That's the rule. So Jason would have to drive about 20 minutes out of his way, taking the other route to avoid that road, and that's what he usually did up until this morning. So Jason pulls up to the other highway and it's blocked off. Road closed. They're doing construction work. He can't get through. So he's got to take this bad highway to get back home with those bodies. Jason said from the time those wheels hit the highway, he felt it. Everything around him began to shift and change. It's like how you feel before a thunderstorm hits. You know it's about to storm. Temperature dropped. The wind started blowing. His ears popped. Things felt weird. All of a sudden, the hair on his arms and neck stands up, and he gets the feeling like somebody's watching him, like they're right on his neck. He heard a woman's voice in his mind say, "Don't stop, keep driving." And he thought, what the hell did that come from? Like an intrusive thought or something. So Jason turns around and sees a woman with brown hair right behind him, and he damn near wrecked the car. He turns around and opens the curtain in the back of the car, but there's nobody there. And the two coffins are still lined up, closed. He hits the gas and starts driving again. When he gets about a mile up the road, he sees this woman in a red dress. And again, he hears that woman in his head say, "Don't stop." But he didn't want to leave this girl out there. She might be in trouble. So he did stop. Jason said, "Ma'am, are you okay? Do you need a ride? I'm going into town." But the woman didn't say anything. She just kept walking. He's driving slow, following her with the car. And again, he says, "Do you need help?" She stops, looks him in his eye and says, "I wonder who'll drive this car when it's you laying in the back." And that scared the hell out of him. Well, he decided at that point he wasn't going to give her a ride, so he took off. He gets over a mile down the road, looks in the rearview mirror and sees a red reflection following behind him, and it's catching up fast. By the time he looks back at the highway and back at the rearview mirror, this thing is right on the back of the car, and now he can see it. It's her. He watches her face as it changes from a beautiful woman into some type of demonic monster, pure nightmare fuel. He said her eyes were that big, jet black, bulging out of her face. She had no nose or ears. She was bald-headed, and there were sharp teeth protruding out of her mouth. Her arms were so long they were dragging past her feet, and she would throw them up and slap them on the back of the car. And every time she would slap the back of the car, it shook the entire vehicle. It felt like she was really strong, like she could do some damage. Well, he's nowhere near the end of this road. It's a very long road. He said he slung that hearse around so hard he could hear the caskets banging up against the wall in the back, and then he peed in his pants. Well, then she's just gone. So he slows the car down, and he's almost at the end of the road, and that's where he sees her. She's standing beside that old stop sign with her arms straight beside of her and her mouth hanging open. Then he sees a big white dog just standing in the middle of the highway. Jason said this is when all hell broke loose because this dog did not look right. This looked like a dog that had been stuffed, like taxidermy. Its eyes looked like marbles. The tongue looked fake. The hair was all brittle looking. The dog stood up on its hind legs, its head turned backwards. The woman and the dog walked up together and contorted their bodies. They were stuck together. And now there was a paw out here and an arm there and a high heel here. And then their heads split apart. Half was hers, half was the dog's, and they both had those big eyes and teeth. There was nowhere to go. Either you drive back onto that haunted highway or you go through these two monsters. He felt trapped. That was when he heard that same woman's voice in his head again telling him, "Get off the highway. Get off the highway now. Back up." As this thing approached the car, he stomped it backwards through the cornfield and got off of that road back onto the other main road. Once he got onto that road, everything shifted again. It was like the sun was back out, the temperature was warm. The craziest part was, when he got back to the funeral home, they unloaded the bodies, and one of them was a woman. During the funeral, her family put a DVD into the TV, showed a video of her singing "You Are My Sunshine" to one of her babies back when they were little. As soon as he heard her singing that voice, it was the same voice that he heard in the car telling him, "Don't stop." It was that woman whose body was in the hearse who was trying to protect him that day. He tells his dad that he needs a break from the funeral home because he thinks he's going crazy and what happened out there. And his dad said, "It ain't you, son. It's that damn road. It's cursed." His daddy, Mr. Milton, said that he had a very similar experience driving down that same highway 20 years ago, transporting bodies from the hospital back to the funeral home.
What would you do if you got separated from your friends in the catacombs and then started hearing a woman giggling in the dark? This is Scared with Jess, and today's story is about a woman who says that there was something in the tunnels that day that didn't want her to leave. A few years ago, I went on a trip with friends and we booked one of those underground catacombs tours. It was supposed to be creepy in a fun way. Old tunnels with skull-lined walls and a guide talking about history and everybody taking pictures they'd never look at again. And at first it was exactly that. There were 4 of us and we were all together when we went down. The tunnels were tighter than I expected and colder too, with this stale underground smell that stuck in the back of your throat. And some passages were lit better than others, and the farther in we got, the more the place started feeling less like a tour and more like something we were not supposed to be wandering through. At some point, we stopped in a wider section because two of my friends wanted pictures. I stepped off a little to the side because I was honestly starting to feel claustrophobic and needed a second. And that was my mistake. I took one wrong turn, and that was all it took. At first, I thought I was still right near them. I could hear voices, or at least I thought I could, so I kept walking. And then the tunnel split again, and by the time I realized I didn't recognize anything anymore, the voices were gone. I called out for my friends, but nothing. I turned my phone flashlight brighter and started walking faster, trying not to panic. And that was when I heard the giggling. A woman, and it was soft at first. Somewhere deeper in the tunnel ahead of me. I stopped immediately, and it happened again. A little louder this time, like somebody trying not to laugh and failing. I remember telling myself there had to be another group down there, another tourist, or somebody messing with me. And then I turned the light down one narrow tunnel and saw her. She was standing at the far end where the ceiling dipped lower. She had long dark hair and a pale face, and one shoulder a little higher than the other. One hand resting against the wall like she'd been standing there a long time. And she was smiling. It wasn't huge, just this soft little smile that felt completely wrong for somebody standing alone in a tunnel lined with bones. I said, "Hello?" And she giggled again. And then she stepped backward out of the light. I started walking the other way, fast. I kept telling myself not to run because I was already lost, and the last thing I needed was to make myself more turned around. I just needed to find the main passage again, find a sign, and find the other group. And then I heard the giggling behind me. I spun around, and nobody was there. I shined the light down the tunnel I had just come through, and for 1 second, I caught her again. She was closer now, and still smiling. And this time I could see her face better. It looked almost normal at first, and that was the bad part. It was close enough that my brain kept trying to force it into a woman's face. And then the details started. Her eyes were too small, one sat slightly lower than the other, and her skin looked too smooth across the cheeks and too tight around the mouth. And when she smiled a little wider, her cheeks didn't move with it. And then she said very softly, "Wrong way." I ran. After that, the whole place stopped making sense. The giggling kept moving, ahead of me and then behind me, and then somewhere off to my right where there shouldn't have been another passage at all. And once it sounded like it came from right beside my ear, and I actually screamed. I kept turning corners and ended up in tunnels that looked exactly the same. The skull walls and the whetstone. My own breathing got louder and uglier every time I stopped. And then I shined the light down one lower side passage and saw her on all fours. Just for 1 second. Hair hanging down and the back bent wrong. Her knees and elbows moved too sharply as she crawled fast out of the beam and disappeared behind the turn. I almost dropped my phone, and at that point I was crying. Not full breakdown crying yet, just panicked tears I couldn't stop while I kept moving. I started yelling my friends' names, and that was when she spoke again, closer than before. "They can't hear you." I turned and found her standing in a narrow passage only a few feet away, her face inches from the wall of stacked skulls like she had been studying them. And then she slowly turned her head toward me, and that image still makes me sick. The smile was wider now, and her lips were wet. Her mouth hung open just a little too long after she finished speaking, and her eyes looked fixed in a way that made her feel less like a person and more like something wearing one badly. I backed away, and she took 1 step toward me, and then she giggled again and said, "You've walked past me 3 times already." I ran harder after that. I don't know how long I was down there. And at some point, my panic got so bad, I started filming on my phone while I walked because I thought if something happened to me, at least there would be proof of what I saw. The video is mostly useless. It's dark tunnel in my breathing, and the light shaking so badly, and me whispering that I was lost. And then one part catches me turning a corner fast and nearly slamming into a wall. And at the very end of the frame, for maybe half a second, there's her face, smiling from another passage. I finally found the main route again by accident. I saw electric lights first, and then the sound of people. And then I finally saw one of the employees. I started crying the second I reached him because the relief hit all at once. He looked confused and asked if I was alone. I said no, I had come down with friends. And when he took me back up, my friends were already near the entrance with one of the staff members. All of them looked furious and terrified. The second they saw me, one of my friends started crying. I remember saying, "Why are you acting like that? I was gone for like 20 minutes. Nobody answered me right away. And then one of them said, "You've been missing for almost 4 hours." I actually laughed because I thought she was joking, but she wasn't. They had already gone looking for me. Staff had gone looking too, and they were close to calling emergency services. To me, it felt like maybe 20 minutes or maybe 30 at the most. I showed them the video later. Most of it was useless, but when we paused it on that last second of the footage, all of them went quiet, because there she was, at the edge of the frame, smiling, and none of us had any explanation for how another woman had gotten that far down there barefoot. And I still have that video, and I've never watched it alone. Anyway, good luck sleeping tonight.
While working as a rideshare driver in New Orleans, I stopped and picked up 2 people near a crossroads late at night. But when I ended the ride, only one person got out. This is Robert's allegedly true story, 2 spooky scary story time. He swears this really happened, and he said while he's been driving for this rideshare platform for a number of years and could tell you many stories about creepy or weird people that he's driven in the middle of the night, nothing comes close to this. Robert had just moved from Austin, Texas to New Orleans, Louisiana, and he said when he was in Texas and driving for the platform, he typically avoided last call late nights because he didn't like dealing with intoxicated people. But after he moved to New Orleans, he was trying to get on his feet. He was trying to make all the money he could. And because New Orleans doesn't necessarily have last call, he drove later into the night than he was otherwise comfortable with. He said New Orleans was also different because there were all kinds of people coming and going all night long, and not everybody was under the influence of something. And so he appreciated the relative calm of the middle of the night. On the night this story takes place, he said he had just finished dropping off a ride in the French Quarter around 2:45 a.m. And as soon as he dropped that ride off, he got another ping for another pickup. The pickup was a little bit to the east in a neighborhood called Bywater, and he said he had some friends in the area already, but he was unfamiliar with this specific location for the pickup because it was at a crossroads. He was not familiar with any specific bar or business at this crossroads, which if anyone's from the area and knows of it, it was at the crossroads of North Fulaire and Piety. If I butchered those pronunciations, please don't crucify me. When he pulled up, he noticed that this intersection was unique because 3 of the 4 corners were occupied by St. Vincent de Paul Cemetery, numbers 1, 2, and 3. It was just something that he noticed but was not otherwise freaked out about because there was a residential block on the 4th corner. But approaching the intersection, he could see the people that he was picking up, or at least who he thought he was picking up, because there were 2 people on the corner. And he pulls up and he can see that it's an older African-American woman with her hair tied up in a cloth and a younger African-American man who was wearing a Nike tracksuit. And the woman opened the door and the man slid all the way in. So he was sitting behind the passenger seat and the woman slid in behind Robert. And Robert looked at the clock. He noticed it was just after 3 a.m. and he started off with the normal pleasantries. He confirmed their location and their drop-off, which was Point Algiers West Bank, and started on his way. And he said normally in the middle of the night, people are usually pretty quiet, but these 2 started talking away like they hadn't seen each other in a long time. Robert said he wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but could obviously hear parts of their conversation, and the man was asking about various people and how they were doing, and they seemed to just be reminiscing about the past, but it was nothing out of the ordinary. After a few minutes of driving, he noticed a cool draft coming from the back seat, but assumed that one of them had cracked the window because it was the middle of August in the middle of the night. When he got on the ramp to cross the CCC, which is the bridge that crosses the Mississippi downtown, he says he noticed the conversation in the back seat was winding down, but didn't think much of it. And by the time he was actually crossing the river, he noticed that the conversation had gone quiet entirely, but he just figured that they had run out of things to talk about as they neared their destination. A few minutes later, he pulled into the neighborhood neighborhood and up to a shotgun house, which was apparently their drop-off. He pulled over and he turned around to thank them and wish them a good night. But he said when he looked in the back seat, he was very confused because now there was just the woman sitting back there. The man's disappearance startled him so much that he actually stopped mid-sentence and said, "Where did he go?" And the woman said, "Oh, don't worry, he got where he was going." And she gave him a polite nod and exited his vehicle. He said it felt like a gut punch to the stomach, and he immediately logged off and went home for the night. And at no point in the ride did he slow down enough where someone could have opened the door and rolled out that he wouldn't have noticed. And besides that, at no point did any of his interior lights come on or did his car ding with the sound of a door being open. It was just impossible. But he says that was one of the last rides that he did in New Orleans, and the city just has a kind of way of warning you of when it's time to be off the road, and that if you are driving there, you should never take rides during the witching hour. And the more he thought about it, the more it made sense that spirits can't cross over water. He says if he was a ghost, it would make sense that the conversation died down around the time we were crossing the river. But he said he seemed solid. He seemed like a real person. There was nothing about him getting in the car that made me think he wasn't. He said he was completely there until we crossed the barrier that he could not. This is Spooky Scary Storytime, the series where we share listeners' allegedly true stories about the creepiest or most unsettling things that they've ever encountered. If you have a story you think nobody else would believe, send it in. We would love to hear it.
So my man and I, we do like little side hustles and we deliver a lot. And so we've been all over Central Florida in different locations. And a lot of the times when we do this, I'll get like these, like a sense, I can't describe it. It's almost like this weird feeling comes over me. And normally I know it's a spirit trying to get my attention or something in that neighborhood or town has happened historically. And so sometimes I'll go and I'll look for information to see, okay, what am I sensing? This is what I feel, whatever this impression is. And I usually find information. This particular time, because this happened to me not that long ago, some time ago, and I posted about it. This is a new situation. So we were in Mims, Florida. I live in Titusville. That's not that far from each other. And usually what happens is like it's like a picture. Like it almost feels like a film or a clip of a film, right? And I'll see an image or some sort of storyline that's happening. That's the only way I could describe what happens to me sometimes in these situations. So we were delivering and we're in Mims. I saw a sign and it was as if somebody just like, boom, like a storyline of a gentleman that was helping a child on a horse. So weird. But then the feeling that I got from the man, right, was that he was not a very nice person, right? Almost like he used his connection to children to do something horrific to them, right? So I started Googling and it was like flashes and more information was coming in. And it was almost as if they were saying, now, by the way, I don't know if what I saw has any connection to what I'm about to explain, okay? It's usually what spirit does to me is take me down these fucking rabbit holes. And I just go, okay, this is what they're talking about. So I started Googling and something told me, whatever this is, it's about a child. It's a cold case. A lot of it is cold cases that come to me. And it's a cold case. It's about a child who was probably SA'd, right? And something's, telling me, hey, I need to talk about this story. So as I'm Googling information, boom, I find a story about a 5-year-old girl. This case has not been solved, and it's from Titusville, Florida. Her name is Amanda Griffin. I will insert her picture here. but they found that she went missing August 4th, 1986, I believe it said. And they found her August 7th, 1986. Or 80, yeah, no, I think it was 1984. Sorry, I'm still kind of like half asleep, basically, because I really wanted to talk about this. But the crazy part is August 7th is my brother's birthday. So sometimes I've noticed that spirit will try to connect to people via something that they are, on the same vibe. Does that make sense? They have some similarities. What's really sad is they've never found this child's killer. She was murdered. She was found August 7th in a ditch, completely naked. And on top of that, she was found with twice the alcohol level in her body, and she had been sexually, So it's really hard for me because sometimes these things come in such ways that I can't explain, and it really sucks because I wish I can help solve something, but the feeling I got when this happened, it was almost as if the person that did this to her knew her, but she didn't know them. As if they had been watching her, or they were. And the other impression I got was that this person was friendly, didn't seem, what's the word I'm looking for? It had the energies of both male and female energy. Does that make sense? So it felt like more of like a male who had that softness to them, where a child could feel comfortable to go with the person. But anyway, I'm going to insert the information that I found because it's still a cold case. They still never found the person, and maybe these new things that are happening to me are for that, to bring awareness to cold cases. So anyway, hope you have a great day.
This is the only story that I've ever received where it actually made me stop recording halfway through and feel like I had to walk around my house and make sure that all the doors were locked. So, of course, I can't validate any of this, so this story is for entertainment purposes only, but I think you're going to enjoy this one. So, a follower sent me this story a few weeks ago, and he asked me to not use his real name, so we're going to call him Matt. Now, Matt said that this started happening in late 2020 after he, his wife, and their 6-year-old son moved into a rental house just outside of a small town in Ohio. Now, the house wasn't like this ancient, it wasn't this like creepy Victorian home with this deep, dark history. Nothing like that. It was built in the early 90s and looked completely normal. Now, for the first few weeks, everything was completely fine, right? Then one night, out of nowhere, during dinner, his son casually looked over at his parents and he asked a question. He looked at his mom and he said, "Why does the tall man stand in my doorway every single night?" And at first they assumed, he was talking about a dream. His mother laughed and asked him what tall man are you talking about? And the kid shrugged and he's just like, the one with the broken smile in my room. And that phrase immediately bothered the both of them, and it creeped them out, of course, not just because it sounded scary, but because it was such a strange thing for a 6-year-old to say and oddly descriptive. And they asked him what do you mean by that? And the boy said that the man's mouth looked like it was hurt. And then he went right back to eating his dinner and didn't say anything. So over the next few weeks, he kept mentioning the man, always casually, never seemed scared of him. Sometimes he'd mention seeing him standing in the hallway, sometimes, in the backyard near the tree line. And once he pointed to an empty corner of the living room and he asked why the man wasn't standing there anymore. Now, Matt and his wife became concerned enough that they considered taking him to a therapist and even their local pastor that they became really close with. But then things got even weirder. One night around 2 in the morning, Matt woke up because he heard his son talking through the baby monitor that they still used as like an intercom just in case. And he thought the kid was, maybe having a dream and talking to himself. But when he listened a little bit closer, he realized that his son was having a conversation. And there would be a long pause, and then his son would answer, and then another pause, and then another answer from his son. Like someone was talking back and forth with him. So Matt got out of bed and walked to his son's room, and as soon as he opened the door, the talking immediately stopped. And his son was sitting upright in his bed, staring toward the closet, wide awake, and Matt had asked him who he was talking to. And his son answered him immediately, and he just said, "The tall man." And Matt checked the room. There was, of course, nobody there. There was nothing around. And his son seemed completely calm, like he wasn't bothered by this whatsoever. And then he pointed toward the closet, and he said something that made Matt realize that this wasn't some just imaginary friend or some type of child's imagination situation going on. His son easily said, "The man said you weren't supposed to hear him tonight." And Matt's like, "Dude, what the hell?" So the next morning, Matt asked his son to describe the man in detail, and the description that he gave stayed very consistent the entire time. He was tall, extremely thin, dark clothing, pale face, huge smile, and eyes that looked wet is exactly how his son described it. And that was the word that the kid kept using over and over, was his eyes are wet looking. Not shiny, not bright, wet. And that's very important, apparently. Now, a few days later, Matt's wife noticed something even more odd. Whenever their son drew pictures, there was a figure hidden somewhere in the image of the son's drawing. Whether they were at the park, at the store, at school, standing outside the house playing, always the same figure and always looking like it was watching them. So eventually they decided to do something a little bit unorthodox, and they had a friend of theirs who had an older son who was an artist, and he was in art school, and he was a great artist, and he actually spent time over the summer interning at the local police department as a sketch artist. So the artist agreed to meet with the kid, and Matt said the sketch session lasted about an hour, and the artist would ask questions like, he would ask questions about the figure, and the boy would make very strong corrections, like, no, the face is thinner, no, the smile is bigger, no, the eyes are wrong, no, the forehead is too normal, like very, very descriptive. And it was over and over until finally the boy said, "That's him." And he said it very excitedly and proud. So the artist later admitted that the drawing absolutely disturbed him, which I'm going to show you. Now, not because it looked realistic, but because of how specific the child was. Children usually change details, but his son did not, and not even once. So the sketch was taken home, and Matt said that they left it on the kitchen counter that night. And around 3 in the morning, his son started screaming, crying, screaming. It was the first time that he had done this, really. And they ran into his room, and the boy was pointing at his bedroom door, and he was hyperventilating, crying. He was unable to speak. And after several minutes, he finally got the words out, and he said the tall man had been standing there. But this time, he wasn't smiling. This time, the tall man was very angry. And when they asked why, the boy pointed towards the kitchen, at the picture pretty much, and he said, "Because you drew his face." Now, the next morning, Matt found something even more strange, if you could believe it or not. This story gets a little weirder. The sketch was no longer on the kitchen counter where they had left it. They searched the entire house, and eventually they found it in a closet laying face down on the floor. Now, nobody admitted to moving it. Nobody even remembered going into the closet. But a few days later, the sightings had eventually stopped, and they stopped completely. There was no more tall man being seen, no more conversations, no more drawings. There was nothing. Now being relieved, they moved on, right? Now months had passed, and then one evening, Matt was organizing old boxes in his basement, and he opened a storage tote that had been the belongings of the previous owners. And most of it was junk, like old magazines and receipts and old mail and everything like that, random papers, whatever. But at the very bottom was a photograph, and the picture appeared to show a family standing in front of the house sometime in the mid to late 90s. And the image, the quality was kind of crappy. It was, a little worn, you could tell, but there was something in the background, and standing near the tree line was a very tall, dark, thin figure, just like looked like it was like looking right at the camera, like photobombing the family. And Matt said that he initially assumed that it was maybe a trick of the light, until he noticed something else, that the face, even though it was a little blurry and even a little distorted, it appeared to have the same unnaturally like wide smile, and the same smile that his son had described for months. And now, according to Matt, his son had never seen the photograph before, and the picture now stays locked inside of a safe inside of Matt's bedroom. And his son is older now and barely remembers any of it, but every once in a while, usually when they're driving past wooded areas at night, he'll stare out the window for a little too long, and he'll quietly ask a question that still terrifies Matt and his wife. And he'll say, like, do you ever think that he ever found his face again? And Matt said that he's never asked what that means or who he's talking about, because he's afraid that his son might actually know the answer and it may jog up some memories. So let me know what you guys think in the comments.
Have you ever seen a ghost peeking around the corner? Now, these peeking ghosts, or peekers as they're often called, are a type of shadow being. Now, people speculate that these may be the spirit of a person who in life was a very violent or evil person. And when they passed, their spirit that remains has no form. And often what it is trying to do by peeking from behind the door, or sometimes even appearing as a person that is just a pile of clothes, is to try and get your attention and to get you to notice it. And by doing so, right, you are giving power to it to come into your life. Now, there was one such story. There was this teenager who lived with his mother. And one night he's sitting in his room and he's watching television, when out of the corner of his eye, he sees what looks like a person peeking from behind the hallway door. So he looks at the TV and he looks back at the door and it's gone. And then once again, out of the corner of his eye, he sees what looks like a person peeking into his bedroom. Another time, he's in his kitchen, and as he walks past the hallway, he thinks out of one of the bedrooms, he sees a head peeking out at him. But when he looks closely again, there's no one there. And he starts having these experiences around the house, and he thinks that maybe it's only him that sees them. Until one night, he's sitting in his bedroom, and he looks over, and he sees something peek from outside of the doorway. And all of a sudden, his mom comes to the door and is like, "Is everything okay?" And he says, "Yeah, everything's all right, I think." But when he looks at his mom, he sees this thing peek out from behind the doorway real quick. And all of a sudden, he notices his mom just gets this horrified look on her face. And he goes, "What's wrong, Mom? What's wrong?" And she wouldn't tell him. Finally, after a couple days, he gets his mom to tell him why she was horrified that night. And his mom says, "The really weird thing happened when I was talking to you and you were sitting in your bed. I looked over at your closet, and for a second, I seen something peek out from behind the closet door." So one night, he goes to bed and he wakes up in the middle of the night and he looks at the post of his bed, right, the front of his bed, and he sees a face peeking up at him. But this time, he actually notices what the face looks like. And he sees this is a woman with long black hair, no eyebrows, solid black eyes, and no mouth or nose. And after he notices this woman, he said he just starts seeing her in his dreams. He started seeing her everywhere he went. And this spirit was almost like tormenting him. His mother, who was very religious, ends up calling in the neighborhood priest. And he comes in and actually does a exorcism on the boy. And after that, he no longer seen this thing anymore. But he realized if he did see it again, not to look at it.
A series of spooky stories, Women's Intuition, Part 11. One day I was studying in my professor's office when I suddenly felt like I needed to call my grandparents and come out to them. I'm a trans man. They were confused, but more supportive than I thought that they were going to be. And my grandpa's last words to me were, "I will always love you, no matter what." Not even a month later, he passed away, and that was the last conversation I had with him. I'm so happy that I listened to that feeling and that my grandpa got to know me as his grandson before he died. On a funnier note, he took a shower with assistance from my grandma and hated the experience so much, he said, "I'm never doing that again." And he was right. Those were his last words. Oh my God. Not my intuition, but my mom's. My room is downstairs in the basement, and there is a window that leads to the front yard. One night around 11, I'm just about to go to sleep when I get a call from my mom. I don't answer it because I think it's a butt dial until she calls me again. I pick up the phone and she says, "Is your window locked?" I told her probably, but she insisted that I should check it just to be sure. Funny enough, my window was not locked, even though I always have it locked. So I locked it and went back to bed. Around 4 in the morning, I hear tapping on my glass. I open my eyes, but I don't move. And to my horror, I see a man trying to open my window and peeking through my blinds. They were sheer, but still dark enough for him to not see full into my room. Luckily, my window was locked and he couldn't get in. So he moved on. I thank God every day that I picked up the phone that second time. Just yesterday, while I was driving with my niece and nephew, we were at a red light, and as it turned green, my nephew rolled down his window. It made a weird noise, so I turned to look at him before driving. As I turned back around, a car ran a red light and would have hit his side of my truck if I hadn't waited. I don't know that I would necessarily call that one intuition, but definitely timing. Divine timing. When my middle child was 2 months old, I woke up from a deep sleep with a sick feeling that something was wrong with her. I immediately went to grab her from the bassinet. She was not breathing, cold to the touch, and blue, gray, purple. She ended up making it, thankfully, but doctor said if I hadn't woken up right when I had, it would have been too late. It was the scariest thing ever, and I'm so thankful I woke up and listened to my intuition. God, that is so scary. Back when I was in high school, I had made plans with a friend to go Halloween decor shopping. The day that I was supposed to go, my mom woke up and begged me not to go because she had a dream that something happened to me. Like it shook her so bad. She woke up crying. I had never seen her like that before, so I stayed home. Later that night, my friend texted me and said that she got into a car accident. A car blew through a red light, hit her on the passenger side, where I would have been sitting. When I was 16, I heard a voice in my head while sleeping that said that my uncle would die. Having 5 uncles, I asked which one, and a photo spiraled down to me from the ceiling to show me. I woke up immediately. My mom was crying at the end of my bed. When I asked why, she told me that my uncle had been in a motorcycle accident and they weren't expecting a good outcome. He passed. I was a sailor in the Navy doing pre-deployment operations. While outside, I had looked up admiring the stars, and a voice came through saying my grandpa was up there. I shook the thought out because my grandpa was still alive. A few days later, when we got close to land, I got a voicemail to my phone saying that my grandpa passed. It was from that day that I had that thought. He was a sailor too. Last year, me and my best friend were not talking due to her going through some things and isolating me out and blocking me on everything. Something told me to call her from a different number. She was on the phone with the hotline about to commit. She thought I hated her after everything. I really believed I saved her that day. My fiance used to be a truck driver and always worked nights. One night while he was at work, I dreamt that I was sitting behind him while he was driving, and I saw that he was asleep at the wheel. In the dream, I screamed at him and slapped him on the back as hard as I could, and he woke up and was able to keep driving. The next day, I told him about it, and my fiance told me that he had been falling asleep at the wheel, but got jerked awake and then was okay for the rest of his shift. I told him, "You're welcome." Holy shitballs. Intuition and telepathy all in one. Come back for part 12.
A mimic is haunting me. Welcome to the Creepy Cozy Cottage, where creepy and cozy meet. Grab a blanket and a plushie and get cozy, because I'm about to read a creepy story. The story I'm about to tell you is 100% true, and it happened to me about a year ago. At the time, I lived in a basement apartment with my fiance, a male 25. His name is Lewis. At first, the apartment was everything we wanted, but over time, the energy shifted. What once was a positive vibe turned into a heavy, depressing, and honestly very negative energy. I haven't thought about this incident since because it happened so long ago, and to be honest, I don't like even thinking about it or talking about it. I'm a firm believer the more you talk about it, the more it manifests into your reality. But it comes to the point where it's too hard to ignore. One night, my fiance and I were working late. We're both content creators, so our evenings usually consist of writing scripts, editing our videos, and occasionally we have time for a show or movie. However, this night was one of those late nights where we were both grinding. Lewis is a gamer. When he'd play his games, I could hear him in his office. He has a car simulator, and when he shifts gear, I could hear it easily from my office. This night, I was very focused, and Lewis opened my door slightly. I saw him from the corner of my eye, his silhouette, hat, and everything. However, I did not want to be interrupted or bothered because I was on a roll, so automatically I said, "Leave me alone, not now." I'll admit it was a bit snappy, but we have this rule where we don't knock, talk, or chat until a certain time, and it wasn't that time yet. I was not in the mood, but I felt bad, so I called his name immediately after he walked away. But here's the thing. 2 seconds later, I heard him shifting gear in his car simulator and yelling. That's when my heart dropped to the pit of my stomach and my eyes widened, because there was no way that he was just at my door. It takes time to set up his entire car simulator, and there was no way in that short amount of time he went from my room to his office. Continued to call his name so he would come to my office, but it took like 3 to 4 times before he heard me calling through his headphones. He comes into the room with a confused look on his face, wondering why I was calling. Immediately, I asked him what he wanted earlier when he came to the room. He looked at me puzzled, and he had no idea what I was talking about, so I asked if he knocked on my door, opened my door, and came into my room at all within the last 5 minutes. He said no. I frantically explained everything to him and what I experienced. He was creeped out, but not as much as me, clearly, because that night he slept like a baby. However, I did not. My fiance and I moved somewhere else because the basement apartment was just too depressing, and honestly, we needed more space. We now have 2 floors. This is great because I don't hear Lewis shifting gear anymore, and I can film edit without hearing him film his content. The space is nice. Plus, we have room for our 2 beautiful little kittens. My office is upstairs where the entrance, living room, kitchen, and bathroom are. It's a beautiful apartment with high ceilings, and at first it reminded me of Gilmore Girls. In my office particularly, there are 3 huge windows. During the day it's beautiful, but at night it's kind of creepy. At first, I loved coming into my office at night because naturally I'm a night owl, but now I hate it. My 2 8-month kittens don't even like coming into my office now, not even during the day. At first, I didn't think it was bad energy, but my mind is shifting fast. Both Lewis and I have seen this phantom cat. At least that's what we named it. And at first I thought it was the spirit of his dog that recently passed, but now I'm not convinced. I consider myself very in tune with the energy, and I've always been a very spiritual person since I was a child. I pick up on things quick. My cats look into my office and stand at the door. Not lately, but in the past their tails have gotten poofy. They won't even stay upstairs at night. In fact, our bedroom door will be open and they choose to stay in the bedroom. We tried introducing them to wandering and running upstairs at night after Lewis and I go to bed, but one time we did that and they came running into our bedroom freaked out. Ever since, they refused to go back upstairs alone at nighttime. The other day, I saw someone standing at our front door. I was filming for my YouTube channel. It looked like Lewis, so I didn't acknowledge him because I know he has a key, and he could very visibly see me filming from the window. I thought he was dropping off one load of groceries at the front door and then going back to the car to grab the rest. He was taking so long, so I decided to ask him why. When he answered the phone, I could clearly hear the background noise of a public setting. He said that he was checking out at the cash register. Another thing is that I think it's trying to possess me or it's draining the crap out of me. I feel so drained all of the time, and lately my anxiety is through the roof. I'm also having problems with my health. I'm actually going to head to the emergency after posting this because I've been on my period for 3+ weeks. At first I thought it was a mimic, then I thought it was gone, but now I think it's something even more evil. It's probably attached to one of us. I don't know how to get rid of it. Let me know what you thought of that story, and if you have any scary stories of your own you'd like me to read, please send me a DM.
The legend of SS O-Ring Meidon is one that is absolutely chilling, and no one knows if it's true or not. This all happened in the 1940s, allegedly, and it all starts when another ship picked up a nearby ship's strange message coming from the O-Ring Meidon. The message said, "We float. All officers, including the captain, passed away in chart room on the bridge. Probably whole crew gone. Die." An American vessel named the Silver Star went out to investigate what was going on, and they came across the O-Ring Meidon. A group of men were able to board, and that's where things get really weird. The entire crew on the O-Ring Meidon they were gone. Their teeth were bared, and they had upturned faces to the sun, staring as if in fear. There was even a dog on the ship, and he was also passed away, and he was mid-snarl, or so it appeared. But the weirdest part about this is none of the bodies showed any sign of physical injuries. The Silver Star was about to tow the Orang Meidon into port, but that's when they noticed that there was smoke coming from somewhere in the vessel. They then left the vessel, and shortly after, the whole thing exploded and sank to the bottom of the ocean. While many of the stories about this end here, there is another story that was published in the 1940s in the San Francisco Reporter. And that tells a story of a man named Rabbit who apparently washed up on the shore of the Marshall Island in the lifeboat with 6 other crew members who had all passed on. This happened 10 days after the Orang Meidon exploded. Rabbit said that he had joined the crew in Shanghai, and he claimed that there were 15,000 crates that he didn't know what the cargo was that had been loaded onto the vessel as it set off for Costa Rica. Rabbit then realized that he was joining a smuggling operation, which he didn't really want to be a part of. It was shortly after they left that the other crewmates started complaining of stomach cramps, and he was starting to get suspicious that something was happening. Then one of the crew members passed away. He figured that it was probably something from those unknown containers that they were transporting that might be a part of this whole thing. So he looked at the logbook and discovered that the crates were from China and that they had sulfuric acid, potassium cyanide, and nitroglycerin in them. Rabbit figured that one of these crates was probably leaking and silently poisoning the entire crew. More men continued to pass away, and that's when Rabbit and 6 other crew members decided to sneak off the boat in a life raft. But only Rabbit would survive the journey, and he passed away shortly after telling this story. What's strange is besides this one article that was written about Rabbit, there is no evidence that there was ever a rabbit at all. There was also no record of the SS Orang Meidon. What's even more strange is that the Lloyd's Register of Ships, which has kept the records of all merchant ships since 1764, has no record of the SS Orang Meidon, and there's also no record of it ever sinking, and no one has been able to find the sunk ship. There was one German researcher named Professor Theodor Seersdorfer, and I way butcher that name, so correct me down in the comments, but in 1953 he found a publication called the Passing Ship in the South Seas, and that's the only thing that ever offered evidence that the SS Orang Meidon was a real ship. The ship would have sunk around the end of World War II, and so it does stand to reason that there would have been a lot of secrecy around this ship. But what are your thoughts? Do you think that it ever existed, or is it all just a legend or folklore? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and follow for more spooky things.
My third wish. My first wish was for a glass of water, something simple to make sure that the man wreathed in glowing smoke who'd come out of that old lamp wasn't just an extremely vivid hallucination. Granted, the genie said with a head nod, and a glass of water appeared on my kitchen table. The glass was cool to the touch, and the liquid was refreshing, so real. It was all real. Right away, I knew what my second wish would be. The Meta Lotto jackpot just reached an all-time high, but since genies in fiction are always twisting around your wishes, which is something that my genie would neither confirm nor deny, I considered my words very carefully. So finally, I said, I wish the numbers on the next Mega Lotto ticket that I buy will come up in the next drawing. Granted, the genie said with a nod, so I went on down to the gas station to buy my ticket, and I was clutching it as I watched the drawing that night. My heart jackhammered in my chest as the numbers came up one by one. So 3 weeks later, after all the paperwork was signed and the promotional pictures were taken, I was $700 million richer. And that was after giving Uncle Sam his cut. So I used my new wealth to buy myself a nice little cabin out in the wilderness, away just from the hustle and bustle of the city, and filled it with entertainment and amenities. And the whole time, my genie just watched patiently, waiting for me to make a final wish. And I thought about it for a long time, because I could afford just about anything that I wanted now, but I wanted to be able to enjoy it for as long as possible. But immortality was out of the question, because it would draw too much attention if I never died, and it's not like I truly wanted to live forever. So finally I said I wish to die peacefully in my sleep at age 80. Genie said granted with a nod, and then he was gone. But the bombs fell less than a month later, and I was far out enough to avoid the initial blasts, but I remember how the ground shook as if the earth itself was fracturing. All electronics have been down since that day, so there's no way to tell how bad things really are. But the skies are choked with ash, and all around me, plants and animals are keeling over from the radiation poisoning. As for me, though, I feel very weak. My head just is throbbing, and my hair started thinning and falling out. I have enough food and water stockpiled, for now, I mean, but hardly anything is staying down anyways, and what comes back up is usually spotted with blood. That was 6 months ago. So as I laid in bed this morning on what should have been my birthday, I carved a mark in the wall. 7 months down and 57 years to go.
What would happen if you responded to a mimic? Now, when we hear about these encounters with mimics, there is often this invitation to let them in, to open the door, or to follow. But what would happen if you actually did? Now, there was this girl named Jill from South Carolina. She was driving home one night at 1 a.m., coming back from work. When she goes inside her house, all the lights are off. Her mom is upstairs asleep. Well, as she walks through the living room, she hears her mother's voice say, "Hello, Jill." She goes, "Mom, why are you up so late?" And all she hears is, "Hello, Jill." She goes, "Okay, Mom, like, why is all the lights off? And why are you in the kitchen?" And she just responds, "Hello, Jill." So she was kind of freaked out. I was like, okay, is something wrong with my mom? She flips the lights on, and there's no one there. And as she goes upstairs to her mom's bedroom, she sees that her door is closed. When she opens it, she sees that her mom is in bed, sound asleep. So she starts trying to rationalize, okay, maybe my mom was talking in her sleep. So she just ignores it. Well, a couple days later, she said she was sitting in her bed, in her bedroom, when she sees her mom walk by. And she says, "Hey, Mom, can you go downstairs and grab me a bag of chips?" But her mom doesn't respond. So she goes to the door. She looks out the hallway. Her mom is not there. She is not even at the house. A few days after this, she is once again in her bedroom. And she hears her mom calling for her, telling her to come downstairs. So she gets ready to go down to the hallway, and she remembers, wait a second, my mom is not home. So she stays in her bedroom until her mom gets there. And finally, a couple days after this, she is coming home from a friend's house. And as she gets out of her car, she notices her mom is standing on the sides of the house with her face turned. She goes, "Mom, are you okay? Like, what are you doing outside?" And she hears, "Hello, Jill." She's like, "Mom?" And she's like, "Come with me into the woods." And she's like, what do you mean?" And she goes, "Come with me in the backyard to the woods." And she's kind of like, that's not my mom. She runs inside the house. She closes the door, and she sees her mom is there in the kitchen. So she goes to her mom, and she starts crying. And she says, "There's something that's following me, and it's pretending to be you." And her mom's just telling her, like, "Honey, it's okay. Like, there's nothing going on. Like, you're just stressing yourself out. It'll be okay." But she was insistent, "Mom, something is pretending to be you." Well, many months pass, and she stops having these encounters. But then one night she gets a call from her mom. And her mom is like, "Hey, honey, I heard you calling me to go down into the basement, but I'm in the bathroom right now. I'll be down, in like 10 minutes. And she's like, "No, Mom, do not go down there. Do not go into the basement. That is not me. I am not at home." And her mom's like, "What are you talking about? Like, are you playing jokes with me?" And she's like, "No, Mom, I am not home." And her mom didn't believe her. She thought she was making it up. Well, a week later, she finds that her mother passed away. And she felt like whatever was pretending to be her mother and then pretended to be her had something to do with it. And did her mom respond to this mimic? There's something definitely going on at Yosemite. Now, out of all the parks I've been to, it is by far the creepiest. There was this man named Tom. Tom and his friend Benny, they decided they were going to go hiking in northern Yosemite, which happens to be the most remote part of the park. Now, they set off on this 10-mile hike, and they got to about the 4-mile marker when Benny had to use the restroom. So he goes off the trail into the woods, and Tom waits for him. Well, 5 minutes pass, Benny doesn't return. 10 minutes pass, he still doesn't return. 15 minutes pass, and he still hasn't come back. So Tom's like, maybe I should go check on him. Like, something might be wrong. So he heads off the trail and he goes into the woods, into the direction Benny went. As he's walking through the woods, he's yelling, Benny, Benny, where are you? And he doesn't hear anything. But that's when he realized, like, he didn't hear the birds chirping. He didn't hear any insects. It was completely quiet. Then he hears Benny's voice say, I'm over here. So he goes in that direction. And he follows the sound of Benny's voice. But then he comes out to the spot and he sees Benny is on the ground. Something has attacked him and he is not moving. But he still hears Benny talking. And when he looks up and over in front of him, he sees this very large man that he described had the face of a deer, but it was human. He said he took off running as fast as he could through the woods. This thing began to chase him. He would go one way and this thing would be in front of him. He would go the other way and it would still be in front of him. He could not get away from it. Eventually, he makes it back to the trail. And as he's running along this trail, he smacks into someone. And as he looks up, it's Benny. And he goes, hey, Benny, like, what happened to you? Where'd you go? Like, are you okay? Are you hurt? And Benny's like, well, after I went into the woods to use the restroom, I heard you calling my name, telling me to follow you. So I went in that direction, and I ended up here. So he tells Benny, he said, that wasn't me. We need to leave now. So they take off running as fast as they can, and they make it back off the trail. And as they are leaving this section of the park, they could hear these loud screams coming from behind them.
I'm like 80% sure I had a paranormal experience last night, and I need your opinion. I know it's gonna sound like not that big of a deal in the beginning, just please hear me out until the end. Okay, so basically last night I was at my boyfriend's house and we were just in his room watching TV, and it was around like 10 p.m. He had a fan in the window of his room and it was blowing air into the room. So naturally that's gonna create a draft, and so sometimes it'll make the door close. It's happened multiple times. We always ignore it because we know it's just the fan. But that's not what happened last night. The fan was on like always, and all of a sudden, the door swung open, not closed. Okay, I'm gonna use my own door as an example. It was like this. So it wasn't fully closed, but it also wasn't cracked open at all. And then all we saw was it go like this. And it was a forceful push. It felt deliberate, so deliberate that I thought it was one of his dogs making its way into the room. But nobody was there, and we just kind of sat there for a minute straight, wondering what that was and what do we do now. I understand that the wind could have circulated differently somehow, and it just made the door swing inward instead of slamming shut. Like, I understand it can be explained away, and it makes sense. And if that was the only thing that had happened, I wouldn't even be making this video. But what freaks me out is what happened after, because a few minutes after, his mom texted him, which I'll insert the screenshot for you now. They have a camera with a motion detection light. And around the same time that we had that weird experience with the door, the light downstairs was going off because it was detecting some kind of motion. And that motion detector only picks up human movement. It doesn't pick up little animals because it's outside. So I don't know, you can call me crazy, you can say I'm overreacting, but like, that feels pretty paranormal to me. Maybe it's the horror content catching up to me, maybe I'm opening some doors. I don't know, but let me know what you think. Try and put yourself in my shoes as well. I'm all for explaining things away, I'm all for the logical explanations, but two things back to back like that in the same time frame, that's gonna do it for me. While I was doing my usual scroll through Reddit to find creepy photos to show you, I found a few that take place in Myrtle's Plantation, which is a historic estate located in Louisiana from before the Civil War, and it is very widely known for being haunted. So let's look at these pictures. I took a night tour at Myrtle's Plantation a couple years ago, and when looking back at the pictures, I spotted some interesting shadow-like figures behind me. It's possible that somebody could have just been walking behind me, but I remember being in the room with the chandeliers completely alone for a while the rest of the group was somewhere else. A few years ago, my friend visited Myrtle's Plantation with his family. While they were taking a tour of the house, he was taking photos of random rooms in passing. The room in this photo was actually not a part of the tour and it was off limits. He's certain that nobody was inside when he snapped this. He didn't even notice anything until he was looking through his photos a few days later. To me, it looks like a shadow being or some kind of lingering energy. Given the history of the Myrtles, I find it interesting.
We shared imaginary friends, same names, same descriptions, but we had never told each other about them. I need to tell you guys this ghost story. This story was sent into my email, and if you have any ghost stories, paranormal encounters, or scary stories that you want to share, you can send them to the email in my bio. My sister is 2 years older than me, and years before I was born, she used to tell my parents about 2 visitors who came into her room at night. These visitors were specific. Not in that there were many details, but one detail in particular. They were clowns. Danny and Benny, the clowns. My parents assumed it was just a child's imagination. Kids make up imaginary friends all the time, even though these were unique. Still, they stuck with their story, but my sister was persistent. Night after night, she insisted the 2 clowns were standing in her room watching her. According to my parents, it went on for a long time, and they figured she would grow out of it at some point, and eventually, the story stopped. Life moved on, and then I was born. My sister moved into the larger bedroom in the home, and I inherited the room that she was in when she was younger. Danny and Benny became a distant memory, and the entire ordeal faded into family history that was hardly spoken of. Or so everyone thought, because when I was eventually old enough to talk, I started telling my parents a very interesting recounting of my nights, about how 2 friends would come and visit me when it was dark, 2 clowns, named Danny and Benny. The exact names, the exact room, the exact same story. The problem was that nobody had ever told me about them. My parents honestly were so lost. I was too young to know anything about what my sister had experienced, yet somehow I was describing the same 2 figures that she had been talking about years before. To be honest, I don't really remember any of this happening, not directly anyway. Most of the childhood memories faded for me as I got older. For years, I really had no recollection of Danny or Benny, and eventually we all moved out of that house. One day, I was sorting through old boxes from my childhood, drawings, school papers, random things that my parents had saved. And that's when I found it. A scribbled, crumpled old piece of paper with a drawing on it that I had made when I was 6 years old. And everything came flooding back. I remembered making the drawing so clearly, and I knew what it was immediately. I had drawn a clown. Its eyes were bleeding, its mouth was bleeding. And written underneath it, in my messy 6-year-old handwriting, were 3 words. Danny, the devil. There it was. Proof that at some point in my childhood, Danny had been very real to me. And even though the story is a horror in itself, there was still someone else. An old man named Sam. Unlike Danny and Benny, Sam never frightened me. I would see him standing at the end of my bed, just watching me, not threatening, not aggressive, just there. A calming presence, almost. Sometimes I would go as far as to simply tell him to go away because I wanted to sleep. Years later, my parents said that the strange things involving Sam happened to them too. Both my mom and my dad independently experienced something sitting on the edge of their bed at night. They said they could physically feel the mattress dip. They could feel the sheets move and crinkle with the weight, as if someone had walked into the room and sat down beside them. But whenever they looked, nobody was there. Eventually, curiosity got the better of everyone, and they decided to invite a medium to the house. My parents didn't tell her anything beforehand. No names, no stories, nothing. But as soon as she entered the house, she apparently looked around and said that there was an elderly man there. His name was Sam. According to her, he had once lived in the house and had died there. She claimed Sam liked me, and that sometimes when I was making too much noise in my sleep, he would soothe me to quiet down. Looking back now, there were countless little things that happened in that house. My bedroom door would slowly swing open by itself. The smell of cigarette smoke would suddenly fill rooms, even though nobody in the house smoked. And on more than one occasion, my bedroom window, which had been completely locked, would somehow fly open on its own. Without any explanation, it would just suddenly open. But the most frightening thing happened shortly after we moved out. The house was mostly packed. We were getting ready to leave for good. Everyone was in the kitchen when, without warning, a drink bottle launched itself across the room, and I mean flew. It flew with enough force to make everyone jump. The room immediately went silent. Nobody could explain what had happened. And for the first time, my family started to wonder if maybe Sam wasn't as happy as everyone thought. Maybe he knew we were leaving. Maybe he didn't want us to go. Or maybe something else in that house wasn't ready to be left behind.
Let's check out this home for sale here in downtown Riverside. It was built in 1910, and chat, let me tell you, I'm spooked. When I was going through the house, I had this eerie vibe, but still not so eerie. I don't know how to describe it. I'm not a skeptical person, I'm not a gullible person, but something just felt a little bit different with this one. With it being built in 1910, a lot of the woodwork and architectural design that the house still has is all original and withstood the test of time. With it having 3 bedrooms and 1.5 bath, and with those bedrooms all being upstairs, the layout of the home makes it very convenient for this day and age, just like it did back in 1910. And when I went inside this one particular bedroom, something just seemed very off. And again, it might just be me, I don't know. But imagine if somehow the house can speak, I'm pretty sure it will have plenty of stories to tell. Let me know what you think of this one, comment down below.
It isn't just the house. There's something going on with this land in general that has a lot of activity. It feels like it has elementals that lean more towards a little bit more manipulative, nuisance. It feels like there's one cryptid actually that very much looks like a dog, but it's bigger and it's black and it's got like almost hunched over shoulders, and it will move through sometimes the neighborhoods quickly, looking for prey. Prey is small animals, and I advise keeping animals on a leash and being aware. It moves very quickly, so if you are not bothering it, it won't bother you. If you are, it doesn't like humans. This is so weird. It doesn't like humans, so if you have animals with you, if you keep the animals close to you, it won't bother you. I wouldn't leave animals alone in the backyard because of this. People will think it's coyotes. It's not coyotes. Although coyotes are there, this is not a coyote. This home in particular has one spirit in it. Old man, very tall, very hunched over, exhausted, heavy drinker, heavy smoker. Like, this spirit has zero energy. I don't know why it's still there. It's like holding his coffee cup, and let's find out why it's there. Saying that his wife died there, and so he doesn't want to leave. Let's see if we can move him over, get him back with his wife. Tony is his name. What's hard about Tony is he won't hear me, he won't see me, he won't look up. So I'm trying to get him to look up and to feel that I'm there. And he's not. So if anyone watching, if you feel like you can move him over, please help him. Don't force, obviously. It's only if he wants, but he's not addressing me, acknowledging me. So maybe someone else can do it. I don't feel children, although I mean, obviously a lot of children have probably lived there. I feel the more of like essence of children that have moved through there, but I don't feel spirits of children. I feel like this guy, Tony, had the house the longest. I feel there's a spirit, an animal spirit. There's a dog, black lab. Maybe it's Tony's. He wasn't a mean guy. He may not have been the nicest guy. feels more like an introvert than I would judge him as mean or bad, just quiet. His wife was more of the social butterfly connection to the neighborhoods and stuff. If it wasn't for her, he probably wouldn't know anybody or talk to anybody. And their dog. And I don't feel like they had kids, and they lived there a long time. And she passed first, a lot younger, and then he lived to be about 89, maybe 90. And definitely after she passed, he didn't talk to anybody. And then there were stories circulating that he, was a scary old man, and that he was mean, and that he would, I feel like there were stories in the neighborhood of things he would do, which none of them were true. And it was just because he was a really sad, introverted man and really didn't have this outgoing, kind wife to balance him out and to show that there wasn't anything wrong with him. He was just quiet. So if anyone can move Tony over, let me know in the comments. That would be really helpful. And take his dog with him. His dog is hanging out because he's staying close to him.
Might have known the story of real-life boogeyman.
This story made me sick to my stomach. This is Oki Kite. People knew him as Al, and he was described as a really kind person. In fact, his girlfriend at the time of his passing said that he would give anything to anybody, all you had to do was ask. In 2004, he was advertising his basement as a rental, and he had several people come and see it. But one night, there was a strange man, or an unknown man, who came to view the basement. While he was showing the basement to this potential tenant, his girlfriend came over and he was like, hey, come downstairs and meet this person who is interested in renting the basement. She had to run to the restroom, so she went upstairs, and by the time she came back, the potential tenant was walking out. He would not turn around to talk to her at all. She saw the back of his head and his profile, but that was it. When he left, Al turned around and said, well, he's not interested, but later this tenant would come back and give him a deposit, and he said he had changed his mind. On May 22nd of 2004, when Al did not show up for work, his coworkers were worried, so they had the police go over and do a welfare check. What they found was terrifying. He was in the basement, and they found that he had been tied up so that his hands were tied to his ankles, and these were really elaborate knots. He had also been severely beaten, and the bottom of his feet had been hit so hard that they were bruised. They also found that knives had been taken from the upstairs and used on his ears and on his eyes. Upstairs, they found that the person who had done this had showered in the shower and had just done random things around the house. So they decided that he was very comfortable with what he had done. He had also taken out the trash. He had taken Al's cell phone and his wallet and had left the residence with him. Police were able to find that Al's debit card had been used at an ATM, and they suspect, well, obviously it was the guy who used it, but when they looked at the surveillance footage from the ATM, the person who pulled up was wearing a ski mask, so they couldn't see hhis face. Unfortunately for this guy, though, he left some DNA evidence. So the police are trying to use that DNA as in a genetic way, trying to build his family tree so that they can catch him. But so far they haven't. They also do have the alias that he used to rent the apartment. He had fake employment history, fake references, everything. He hid his identity very well. But he used the alias Robert Cooper. And anytime someone would come around the house when he was there, he would turn his face away. It wasn't just the girlfriend, but he would often turn his face away so that people couldn't see him. Now, I did read in some news articles that they have found his cousin or his second cousin, but it still hasn't led to his identity. But this man deserves justice, and this case was honestly horrifying to me. So what are your thoughts on it? Let me know down in the comments and follow for more true crime.
This disturbing image has been circulating around the internet for years, and even if you were to stop and really examine it, you probably still have absolutely no idea what it is you're looking at. The image shows an X-ray of a man's pelvis, where nearly 30 needles have been embedded in his flesh, and it belongs to, undeniably, the most sick and vile human being that we have record of. Albert Fish was a self-proclaimed serial killer who bragged about, quote, having a child in each state. And the things he did to these children are so sickening that I can't even explain his crimes on social media. You see, when Albert was a child, he was raised in an abusive orphanage, and over time, he developed a sort of likening to the pain that he was being subjected to. So much so that he developed a passion for inflicting pain on himself, like inserting dozens of needles into his own body. And then eventually it evolved into a joy of inflicting pain on others. Along with this practice of sticking needles into his groin and abdomen, he would also hit himself repeatedly with a nail-studded paddle and insert a piece of wool doused with lighter fluid inside of himself and set it ablaze. But that is nothing in comparison to what he did to his victims. He targeted children, people with intellectual disabilities, and African Americans. After he was done torturing, mutilating, and eating, yes, eating his victims, he would often send letters to their loved ones describing in horrific detail the things that he had done to them. For example, he sent a letter to the Budd family after their 10-year-old daughter's disappearance describing what a delight it was to consume her body, specifying that it took him 9 days to finish every last bite.
Y'all, I just heard about this Mona Fendi case. It is something, I tell you. Mona Fendi was this lady that wanted to be famous. Like, her dream and wish in the whole entire world was to be famous. Basically, she was taking music seriously, but it wasn't going in the way she wanted to. So she switched over to witchcraft. She would do these like practices and like cleanses, and you know, she was pretty successful in it. She got really popular with, you know, being the name related to that subject. So a politician wanted to, like, you know, collab with her. He basically wanted, you know, maybe like the same wishes. And so he went over to her house, and when he went over there, he went at around like 10 p.m. and the people that were there was Mona, her husband, and Mona's assistant. And so the politician went into one of the rooms where the ritual would take place, and Mona told him to lay down on the ground with your head facing up and close your eyes and just imagine money falling from the sky. While the person is laying down imagining this, right, she's acting like she's doing a ritual, but really they were getting ready to unalive this person. The politician opens his eyes, or her eyes. They see Mona's assistant with an axe, and he just starts doing, you know. While he's doing it, it only took about 3 like hacks before the person's head was detached from their torso. Eventually, they end up cutting the person up more times. The cut was cut up into 8 different pieces. Now, while they're going on with their life, I don't recall how long ago it was, but a police officer had stopped Mona's assistant, and the assistant just couldn't hold the secret in anymore. He or she admitted to everything they did and was basically bringing the cops back to the house that Mona lives at with her husband, and was describing everything they did and told them where the remains was. Buried the remains somewhere in the house. And if you look up pictures of the house, to me it kind of looks like a abandoned mansion or something like that. They only show but so much pictures, but it looks weird. Unfortunately, when the police officers got there, they did not find the person's remains at all, and still to this day they don't have the person's remains. Mona, her husband, and the assistant all, you know, admitted to everything, and they also mentioned that they skinned the person and just was doing like really crazy things to the person. Meanwhile, the person was already deceased. They didn't show any type of remorse. And also, Mona, during every single court hearing, she wore bright colors. She had a big smile on her face. If you look her up, you see how many times she done smiled. Like, she just really didn't have any remorse for it. And she also mentioned that her dream finally came true, which was to become famous for anything. And in this situation, it was for unaliving a politician. And people was coming there asking for her autographs and just weird shit like that. And she was signing everything. Like, she really felt like a celebrity. And she was so happy about it. Where they automatically like got a death penalty, all three of them, for the murder, even though they didn't find their remains. Before the lady was put to hang, her last words were basically something along the lines of like, she doesn't have any regrets. She's happy that she got what she wanted. Her saying, quote unquote, she will never die. Even after they hung her, I'm pretty sure she thinks that she won't ever die. That story is so crazy and so sad. If y'all want more information on that, definitely do your research.